Somebody once said that birds would not have a desire to fly south if there was no south for them to go to. So today, as I was going out for my daily walk, I was looking at the geese out there who have traveled south for the winter. And I was thinking about how in our lives sometimes we do the same thing. We migrate from one place to another and we begin anew. And sometimes we feel like we just need to do something. It could be something big, like a life-changing reinvention of yourself, or it could be something small, just like that little nagging guidepost that is there telling you that maybe you should call someone or reach out or go do something that you haven't done before, or any number of things of that nature. Just those little things that just pops in your head and you think, I guess maybe I should do that. It feels like a nudge. It feels like a calling of some sort. And then it can lead you to unexpected outcomes and places. And I think that it's important to listen to that and to heed those things, because sometimes maybe life is filled with random stuff, but there's a certain degree of meaning underlying all of it as well. And if we listen to that still small voice that whispers, that makes us feel like maybe something is right for us in a particular moment, sometimes maybe it's nothing, but sometimes maybe it does turn out to be a thing that will change your life or the better. And you never know what is going to change your life. I was thinking about how people say, you know, work really hard and take a lot of ownership and responsibility in your life for your destiny, because you are the author of your life and there's not anyone else going to come and pick up the pieces other than you. So you've got to make it happen for yourself. But then I look at my own life and I think about how the things that really make the most difference oftentimes are not the things that I planned out. They're life's random moments which lead to doors opening and opportunities presenting themselves. And that's a good segue into how our lives may feel like they are completely up to us to figure out, but the truth is there's a lot of random providence that guides us along life's path. It really isn't all just us pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps and using brute force and sheer will and grinding and hustle culture to force our way to the top of life's pyramid. It doesn't really work like that. No matter who you are, you owe a lot to people who have showed grace in your life. You owe a lot to chance and random encounters, happy accidents that lead you to conversations you might not otherwise have had, or to places you might not otherwise have gone. I was walking around a construction site that's next to my apartment complex. There's some people building something there, and it is interesting how when you look at a construction site, so often you see the signs there that say who's building it, what construction company is building it, but you don't really necessarily see anything to indicate what is actually being built. So I've been watching this construction site as the workers keep on building, and now the steel frame is above the ground and they've started to put some of the paneling up on there to create the walls and stuff. It'll be interesting to see what it is. I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of a business or a meeting space or a little warehouse. I don't know. It's hard to tell what it's going to be. But I was thinking about how there's so many people who work to make the world move forward. The people that are out there doing concrete work, the people that are roofing or doing something related to constructing a building that will eventually become a place where business is conducted. And yet, so often those people who help contribute to the world that we enjoy, they don't really look for recognition. They're just going through that daily grind. And yet, none of all of the stuff that you look at, you know, like when you go on LinkedIn and see a bunch of people all smiling and taking pictures of each other or whatever it is, you know, like all of those end results, they could never happen if it weren't for the people that are mowing grass and working on a construction team and etc., etc. And a lot of times those people that are working on construction sites and stuff, they're minority populations. They might be Hispanic, or they might be you know, some other nationality of people, but they're often sort of marginalized a little bit. And it's not that they're not that they don't have a good job. It's not that they you know, don't have a place in society. It's just there's certain people who maybe in their life they never really feel like they have the opportunity to experience the full spectrum of opportunities that we would think of as the American experience. And I don't know if there's really a fix to that, other than maybe it's something to be aware of. Just something you think about, you know, when you're out going for a stroll. But then I also think about how sometimes the reason why there's stereotypes is because people don't really challenge the status quo. They do whatever it is that they have always done. They do the things that are recommended to them. They take the path that is presented to them instead of actually going outside of that comfort zone and doing something new and different. You know, and you can look in people's lives and say, well, why are they where they're at? Is it because they were underprivileged, or they were marginalized in some way? They didn't have opportunities? Well, maybe. But sometimes it's also just because they never really believed that there were other things for them to consider out there. You know, like if somebody maybe, you know, English was their second language, well, they're more likely to take a job that doesn't involve a lot of talking to people, that's more manual labor. Or maybe it's a thing where, you know, they don't feel like they have that many connections, and so they will go into a business where their friends or family already are established. And so then you start to have that that cycle of you know, it gets to be more and more of a thing, like the taxi cabs in New York being all driven by migrants. At least that's kind of the stereotype. And why is that? Well, probably because migrants came into New York, and then they kind of established that as their own space. And then it started to be more easy for others who arrived to be able to join those professions. It's not that it was really like they were segregated into that. It's just that's kind of how it worked out. And in our lives, whoever we are, I think it's important to remember that your life can potentially change and take a course that's new and different. But in order for that to happen, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to go outside of the comfort zone, right? You've got to be willing to say, you know, I'm going to try something that's new, something that's different, something that's not what I've always done, or what my people or my family has always done, right? Like to have that willingness to venture something different and something new. Because if you always go with the path of least resistance, or what people recommend that you do, you know, then you can find yourself in a situation where you're stuck in an ecosystem that's very limiting. So there's that. Anyways, you know, what else? It's there's an interesting thing in my neighborhood where people line up and the cars all slowly snake through this park. And what they're doing is they're lining up so that they can go pick up their children from school. So around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or 2:30, you're going to see this mile-long row of cars snaking through the parking lot of the park. And then they go out the park entrance and across the street into the school. And the reason why they do that is because they can queue up in the parking lot without disrupting surface street traffic. And it's an interesting phenomena. I don't know why so many people go to that school to pick up their children. I assume that kids can ride a school bus, but then parents could also choose to come and pick them up in person. And that's just all it is. Some parents choose to pick their kids up instead of making them ride on the school bus. Not super sure exactly how all of that works. But when I look at that, it can't help but make me think about urbanism and how our lives are maybe not quite the way they should be. We try to have a higher quality of life, and in many ways we do have a very high standard of living. But then there's this dark side to it at the same time. Like, while our quality of living is higher than in some ways it's ever been, and certainly in first world countries like the United States, we have a better way of life than many other places in the world, we still have room for improvement. And when you think about people working long hours in their jobs, probably absorbing stress, and then you think about family life, and people will say, well, I'm working because I want to support my family, right? And then you picture something like what I just described. It's that parent that is going to spend a whole lot of time waiting in a queue, sitting in gridlock, so that they can go pick up their child at school. And it makes you wonder, you know, like, are we doing things the way we should be doing them? Like, are we managing our society the right way, where people spend much of their day sitting in gridlock or a commute or traffic or something like that, and then they don't feel like they have time to spend with their family? They're too busy to be mindful about spending time with their family, you know, too distracted to just go hang out in the park. You look around neighborhoods and you realize that no one really goes outside. Like, yeah, sometimes they do, but in general, sidewalks are empty because people don't really walk very much, and parks are empty because people tend to stay inside. And we live in our houses or our apartments watching some sort of TV. You go out there and you just see all of the illuminated glows of thousands of flat panel TV screens flickering in the darkness, and you know people are just sitting there fat on their couches watching TV, because by the time all of their things that they had to do in life are finished for the day or finished for the week, they're just exhausted from it. And you know, it's kind of dystopian in a way. And I don't say that to be negative, because life is not all bad, and as much as we like to say that things are dystopian today, they're actually much, much better than they historically ever have been before. Like if you go back to the Middle Ages, or you go back even further, you go look at the Roman Empire, go look at anything throughout history, any time where people have been, you know, having civilization, things have been worse generally than they are today. Like we live in a time of relative peace, prosperity, and we have many, many blessings in our lives. So if all we have to complain about is something like sitting in too much traffic or being too busy or something like that, then maybe, though they are small things, but that doesn't change the fact that this is the life that we have. This is the society that we are in, and we can say that life is good and also openly criticize the ways in which we could hope for it to be better as well. It doesn't mean that we don't have reasons for gratitude. We just have more things that we can work on to make the world a better place. You know, like if you live in the United States, you're going to probably enjoy a pretty high quality of life for the greater part. But then if you compare the United States to other developed countries, in some cases we are more violent. We have more underlying issues with poverty. We have more issues with gun violence, and we have higher rates of homicides and things like that. So to look at the United States and say, well, it's the best country in the world, well, in some ways it is, but then in some ways there's probably other countries that are doing a better job at some things, like maybe work-life balance, or people having a harmonious family life, or maybe rates of education, or rates of obesity, like all of those different things. Like there's so much we can look at other places in the world and we can say, well, you know, maybe we in some ways live in one of the best places to live in the world, but we also in some ways aren't the best place. And that comes down to a question of stewardship then. How do we make the world we live in a little bit better, and kind of be aware of both sides of that conversation? That there's some things that we should be really grateful for because they're a lighthouse to the world, and there's also some things that we should be rightfully critical of because they're things we need to improve on or work on as a society. So we're on our way in this game, going down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, from Springdale, Arkansas, to experience the new American Truck Simulator map, Louisiana. And I was kind of excited to see that because Louisiana is a pretty cool state, and I really enjoyed my time going down to see New Orleans. So being able to now drive down to New Orleans in the game, I thought was pretty cool. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Another thing I was thinking about is how management is so different in different places, and that's been on my mind just because I spend 15 years working in Walmart stores, different levels, and you know, you see different types of leadership, different management styles, and then of course now in my new job, it's a different kind of an environment from stores because it's an office, right? So what's interesting about that is that you have sort of a brute force method of management that is applied, maybe necessarily to a point, in the field. Because imagine if you're a manager and you have to make people do the things that they need to do in order to run a business, and the people that you hire really don't want to be there. Like, maybe they're people who are living near the poverty line, maybe they're people who are uneducated, maybe they're people who have pre-existing reasons which are why they would not be able to get a job somewhere else. Maybe they're too old to work effectively, maybe they're too young to have work experience, maybe they're just kind of unmotivated, those people who are not particularly good at anything in life, not because they couldn't be, but because they don't want to be, just because some people are not very motivated. There's a lot of different reasons why you might discover yourself in a situation where your people that you're managing are not exactly the kind of people who are, shall we say, fun to manage. And you want to say, well, we take care of our people, we put people first, we value people, etc., etc. But the thing is, what kind of conversations do you have to have with your team? If you have to remind your employees to bathe themselves, or tell them that they have to wear a name badge, or you have to hold them accountable because they're saying vulgar things while they're on the clock, or stuff like that. Well, it's very different to manage that sort of a workforce, which is very transient and uneducated, versus a more professional workforce. And I'm not saying that you don't have problems in professional spaces too. Certainly there are people who are not super engaged, or they're not the best performers in some particular way. But all things considered, if you are managing a professional workforce of people who have some level of tenure or skill, and who chose to be there because they want to be there, then you don't have to worry about a lot of the day-to-day problems that are extremely common when you're field management. And as a result of that, it's a lot easier to be a more empathetic servant leader, if you will, because the people that you are supporting are less likely to put you in a position where you have to pull rank in order to get them to do what they're supposed to do, right? And the interesting thing there is that when we talk about leadership skills, what doesn't get talked about enough is that there's different styles of leadership, and both of them, all of them, are necessary in different situations. So you can say, well, you should be really sensitive to people, and you should listen to them, and you should ask them how you can serve them and things like that. Well, that's great. But what if those people are not really the kind of people who react well to that? Like, what if they're the kind of people who you have to kind of lay out very firm expectations and you have to follow up all the time, right? I mean, you know, like just using Walmart as an example, there's a lot of associates working in Walmart stores where it's necessary, if you are a manager in one of those stores, to continually follow up and check on them and make sure that they're not wasting time. Like, you need to make a point to check on them and put eyes on them visually every 20 minutes or so. And if you don't do that, then they're not going to get anything done. They're not going to accomplish their job because they have to be babysat pretty much. And you know, like, that's, you know, thankfully, you know, I think about this from time to time, working in an office environment now. Like, we don't have any of that really. Like, I'm sure that there's productivity issues in some situations, but in general, like, people do what they need to be doing. Like, there's not a need for a manager to constantly be looking over people's shoulders every few minutes because they're not going to do their work if they're not being perpetually, minute by minute, monitored, right? So there's that type of leadership, which, you know, you kind of have to be the drill sergeant. You have to be like, hey, keep going, you know, stay focused, you know, zip up your shirt, you know, don't belch at the table, right? You know, like stuff like that. You know, and it's one of those jobs where field management makes you realize, you know, this is why we cannot have nice things, because if you put a nice tablecloth out, people are going to draw all over it, because left to their own devices, they act like children, you know. And then there's other environments where you don't. Like, you're working with people who are professionals, and if you want to be a good leader, you have to treat them in a way that earns their respect, because professional people do not respect leaders who treat them in a way that is disparaging or super micromanaging. And the truth is, like, you have to have different methods of management for different people. And I have talked to various leaders in different disciplines, and they have said things along the lines of field management, even upper level field management, sometimes struggles if they get put into a situation where they have to manage in a different way, because, you know, like, what works in, say, managing a Walmart store doesn't work very well if you were managing a team in a corporate environment and like a home office situation. And so I think for a lot of professionals out there, for people who want to develop themselves, it's really important to understand that there's different types of leadership. And if you spend all of your time, all of your career developing in one of those, but not the other, then you wind up in a situation where you're not able to adapt to the clientele that you are supposed to be supporting. Like, you could be a corporate manager and you know how to manage professionals, but then if you go into, say, a store and now you're dealing with a whole team of people who are all working their first job, and you have an annual turnover of 60%, well, maybe you know how to manage a small team of professionals, but you don't know how to manage a big group of undisciplined young people, or vice versa. You know how to maybe be a person who gets results in some kind of a field office, but you don't know how to earn the respect of more seasoned professionals or people who, you know, don't react very well to some of those more brutish ways of leading. We have to be different kind of, you know, different kind of people, I guess, for different groups of people. And that's hard in life, because you can look, and it's not just leadership, like you can look at many situations where you feel like you want to have one best way that you follow for everything, and that doesn't work very well, because inevitably at some point you discover that what worked pretty well in one situation just completely doesn't work at all in a different situation. And being adaptable is important. Like, you have to be able to be firm. You also have to be able to be gentle. You have to be supportive. You also have to sometimes be assertive. And a big key to all of this is honesty. I think that's what ties it all together. And so often we think about honesty as not telling lies. But more accurately, honesty is being willing to be candid about the status of things without avoiding conflict in some way. You know, if somebody is underperforming, you should tell them the truth. If you want something, you should tell the truth. If you don't like something, you should tell the truth. And we should always be willing to render to others honest, candid responses quickly and in the moment with immediacy. And that's what gets people messed up many, many times. They don't act with immediacy in the business of being honest about where they stand and what needs to be done and all of those different things. And so they let little things kind of be a can that's kicked down the road until eventually little things grow into bigger things, and then there's a lack of consistency and a loss of trust. And, you know, whether you're dealing with, you know, people who are professional or people who aren't professional, if you're very honest with them and you're very direct and you tell the truth of your heart all the time, chances are, if you keep your word and you follow through on things and you do exactly what you say you're going to do, and you never portray things as being different than what they are, you're gonna wind up doing okay, like regardless of what kind of people you are managing, and what sort of situations you are managing. And sometimes management is not about managing people. That's another thing that's kind of a useful anecdote. Sometimes if you want to manage well, don't worry about managing others, worry about managing yourself. Like, can you trust yourself to do the right thing? Can you trust yourself to to follow through, to be consistent? You know, like it's character things, right? Like, if you have the right character in your personal life, then you're more likely to be successful in general in your professional life, no matter what it is that you are doing. So here we are at what appears to be a Love's gas station, if I had to make a wild guess, something a bit like that in the game. Phoenix is the name of the gas station in the game because, you know, there's no branded stuff for copyright reasons. You can download a mod that will be adding real-world brands into American Truck Simulator. But I find that once you go down the rabbit hole of modding everything, sometimes you wind up being more focused on modding the game than on playing the game, so I kind of tend to go light on mods. Like, if I can enjoy the game vanilla, I just do that. I pulled into the wrong gas station, though. That was the gas station for autos. I need to go to the gas station that's for semi-trucks. There we are. Certified scales. ACE certified scales. In real life, I believe that they're called CAT. CAT is the brand of scales you will normally see at truck stops like this one. So we're gonna get some gas. I like to do a kind of a let's play sort of a episode of doing a longer truck driving trip in ATS. Thing about it though is if you're just driving down the road, it can be hard to think of interesting things to talk about for all of that time. So I went to Kansas City a couple days ago. It's something we can talk about while we roll along. I went to Crown Center. It's a shopping center in Kansas City. And oh shoot, look at that. Accidentally turned the engine off when I was trying to turn my turn signal on. Anyways, Kansas City Crown Center. It's a shopping center with around 40 stores in it, anchored by the Hall's department store. And it's a really nice space. I wanted to see the Christmas tree that got put up there because a big Christmas tree was brought down all the way from Oregon. And so I went there to see that, and it was about a 3-hour drive up there. Got a cup of coffee, looked at the Christmas tree, looked at a few of the shops there, wandered around the World War I memorial. It's a really beautiful memorial if you've never seen it. World War I memorial was built as a tribute to the end of the First World War and as a memorial to the promise that we would never again have another war like that. Of course, shortly after, World War II happened, so maybe there's a lesson there. You can think that the worst is behind you, and turns out it's just beginning. But The World War I memorial's pretty nice. It had snowed, so I was wandering around there, looking at people having snowball fights. Went into Union Station. They've got a beautiful Christmas tree there, set up in the middle of the train station. You got Amtrak, and then you've got like a museum in there, and just a lot of different cool stuff at the Union Station in Kansas City. It's a very monumental structure. Kind of gives you Grand Central Station sort of vibes when you walk in. You see the big vaulted ceilings and archways that are just super beautiful, and everything's all decorated for Christmas. Really fun. Got myself a nice blueberry scone while I was in there, and a second overpriced cup of coffee, which was great. And then I rode the free monorail from Crown Center downtown to the farmers market area, which is a nice, short, easy, free train ride down the streetcar route, which connects the Crown Center shopping area to the downtown areas. And that's one thing that's really nice about Kansas City. You can get around downtown on the streetcar for free. You've got a nice shopping center there. You've got nice views of the riverfront, farmers market kind of a deal if you happen to be there on the weekends or earlier in the day. You know, I definitely think Kansas City is a fun place to return to fairly frequently. I remember living in the Tacoma area, and I would drive up to Seattle all the time. Going downtown Seattle was like my main thing I like to do. Like, that was like my number one escape, to go to Seattle and enjoy a day in the city. And these days, living in Northwest Arkansas, I've been kind of trying to figure out, like, where would I go if I wanted to get out of town and spend a day or two somewhere else. And Kansas City really is that place. It's 3 hours to drive. It's not terribly far. Like, if you leave in the morning, it's very easy to go there and spend a while and then come home in the evening. It's super accessible. It's easy to find parking, and it's a big area that you can travel around without needing to necessarily get in the car to drive around. And so I would imagine I'll probably wind up going back to Kansas City again in the future, just because it's a place that I've kind of come to appreciate and enjoy. And I was thinking about how a few simple things that you can do to, you know, like, make people's experience better can make such a huge difference. You know, just having a shopping center in the proximity of downtown, that's huge. You know, like, it makes a big difference because it means you have a reason to go downtown. Or having free transit in the downtown corridor. That's amazing because it means that now you can relax and you're not thinking, oh, I need to, like, go get in my car and then go out of the garage and then find another garage or whatever, right? Like, little things like that, they can make such a big difference in terms of the experience that you have if you're a visitor to a place. And I think about other cities that don't have some of those things, and they could be nice, but they don't feel like a destination I'd want to return to frequently because of things that are just adding too much friction to the experience. You know, like, you go to Kansas City and you park all day in the garage and maybe it's costing you $15 or something. If you go to a place like Chicago, try parking in a garage and you realize you're going to pay $60 for an afternoon of parking. You know, like, those are the kinds of things when you figure, like, it's a lot of traffic to get there, and then it's difficult to get in and out and things like that, then, you know, It's amazing how just a little bit of reduction of friction can translate to an enormous increase in appeal. To contrast that, I went to Little Rock as well during my days off, and I went to the zoo, which was kind of nice, but it was a rather cold day and there really weren't many people there. It kind of felt like walking around a place that was closed. Like there was a few animals that were cute and fun to see, but for the greater part, the zoo is not really popping off on a cold weekday afternoon. But I went there and I saw it because it's been kind of on the bucket list. I wanted to see the Little Rock Zoo. We don't have any other major accredited zoos in the state of Arkansas, so the Little Rock Zoo, while it's not the biggest, is the only zoo that Arkansas can call its own. And it is nice for what it's worth. Seems like it's well managed and a pleasant place to visit, especially if it's maybe a little bit more like in the summertime, probably. And then I went to the Dillard's headquarters. I wanted to see the headquarters of Dillard's department store because that is also in Little Rock. And you know what stood out to me there was that, yeah, like if you go to the Walmart corporate headquarters, you see like so many inviting spaces, like outdoor spaces that are designed to invite pedestrians, and retail mixed into the corporate campus so that you could get a cup of coffee or get something to eat, even if you were not a person who works at Walmart. And there's bike trails going through, like all of that stuff, you know. And then if you go to the Dillard's headquarters, like it's up on this hill, there's not really any sidewalks there, so like you walk across the grass to get over there, and it looks like a nice building, but it's just your typical corporate fortress with dark tinted windows, and it's imposing and kind of intimidating, and not in any particular way does it seem like a welcoming space. And I have nothing whatsoever against Dillard's, but it just got me to thinking about how the way companies project themselves in terms of designing their corporate spaces can be a meaningful thing when it comes to how they are seen. You know, like even Dillard's department stores don't feel particularly welcoming. Like they are. I think that they're probably among America's best department stores if you're looking for a high-end experience. But at the same time, they're not affordable. They're not accessible in the sense that the average person is going to go into a Dillard's store to do shopping. Like, yeah, you know, anyone can go in there, but for the greater part, probably for most average Americans, shopping at Dillard's is a rare exception to the rule. It's not a place where they're going all the time. And it's not going to be a place where they buy a lot of stuff. Like I'll go to Dillard's and buy cologne that I like, but I'm not going to go probably buy a bunch of shirts or pants from Dillard's because they'd be too expensive. I just wouldn't even think to go do a lot of clothing shopping there because it's out of my price range. I'll go to a place like maybe a Kohl's or Walmart or Amazon or something to order my clothes because I can afford them properly. And so there's that whole sense of accessibility when it comes to design. Like, do we design our spaces in a way that screams inviting and inclusive, or do we design spaces in a way that sort of pushes people away by giving off the vibe that if you're not part of the club, then you don't really belong there? And that could be true for any kind of thing, not necessarily just how a corporate office space is designed. But I just thought it was interesting when you look at the contrast between a big, old, imposing office building and an inviting modern space that is, you know, friendly to the public and easy to like see because there's lots of windows and natural light coming in. You know, like if you go to the Walmart campus, one of the things that'll stand out is you can pretty much see from the outside everything there is inside all of our buildings there. It's just, you know, all of the office desks and things that you would expect to see, but they're just there, like, because the buildings are filled with natural light and big windows. And so, you know, there's not really any need to go inside those buildings to know what's in them, because you can just look in the windows and you can see what is in them. And that sort of a culture of transparency, I think, is pretty cool. Obviously, if something is confidential, then people don't need to see it. But, you know, nothing secret happens in office spaces. It happens on phone calls, it happens on computer screens, you know, but there's not really a need for ivory towers that conceal the view and give off the perception of, you know, like peasants looking up at the stone castle walls wondering what it's like to be part of royalty. You know, everybody puts on their pants just like everybody else, as the saying goes. I've been listening to a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature. One of my coworkers told me about it, and I started listening to it on Audible, and I thought, it's a really good book. A very long book, it seems, but I've been working on it, and I'm going to finish it. It's all about how the world is so much a better place than it used to be, and we tend to think that things are getting worse just because we're always exposed to stuff like social media and news that's readily available all the time. It's really easy to get that feeling that the world is kind of just circling the drain. But if you look throughout history, like, we probably live in about the best and most peaceful time ever. And I think it's important for us to remember that, because whenever we're tempted to be cynical about things or critical of things, it's good to just pause and contemplate the fact that even if there are opportunities for us to work on, to be better, we still live in a beautiful world, in a beautiful time. It's the best time in history to be alive. We can play American Truck Simulator and drink coffee and shop at Walmart and go on road trips and so many other interesting things. So, if there is any takeaway, it's always keep an open mind and think about all the different things that maybe are important in life, but also remember the high level should always be gratitude, should always be celebrating what is going right in our country and in the world. Not just having that feeling of, you know, that something is always broken or wrong. And that's something that carries over into all of our relationships with others too. If you look at other people through the lens of seeing everything as a golden opportunity for meaningful, positive connections and things like that, then you're more likely to have a good experience in life, I would say. Anyways, here we are. We have finished our road trip to Baton Rouge, and now it's just a matter of pulling in with this trailer to see if we can deliver it effectively. Every time I play this game and I think about backing up a trailer, I'm reminded of how difficult it can be to drive a truck. And I think about the people who do it for their real life work, and kind of makes you remember those guys don't have easy jobs. Now, I don't know if I drive straight in there, I don't know if I'm going to be able to navigate this trailer the way I need to or not, so we're gonna weasel in there and see. Yeah, I probably have enough space. We should be happy that we were able to make it through this road trip here in the game without crashing into anything. I think I did get one ticket for driving without my headlights on, but you know, it's all right. At least I didn't do any permanent damage, didn't take out any light posts or other vehicles or anything like that. I could try to use the mirrors to back up, but I think in the interest of practicality, I'm just gonna use the exterior view to do my backing up here. Now, it is possible to play American Truck Simulator with VR goggles or head tracking equipment. I think I have to straighten out myself out here because I'm missing the dock. That's all right. Personally, what I found, though, is that American Truck Simulator is just a perfectly fine experience using an Xbox controller. There really isn't any need to invest in a steering wheel. I used to have a PS4 steering wheel that was attached to my PC that I used with this game. And it had foot pedals too, which was kind of cool. But then I had it like mounted to the desk because it had to be somewhere. And then that just adds a little more clutter to your office area. So then the wheel broke, and I thought, you know, do I really want to get another one? And I concluded, you know, I don't know. I don't think I really need another one. So I just got the Xbox controller and went with that. And it has suited me just fine. So there we have it. That is one successful delivery in the books. And our first delivery into the Louisiana map of American Truck Simulator. Been a fun talk. Just about an even hour on the clock. So, till next time, thanks so much for watching.